He'll make it for sure. Now that's why I backed him on TABtouch.
Hey, Luke.
Yes, Gene Simmons?
He's probably the best when it comes to this stuff.
Thanks, Gene.
You've got the touch. You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
Hello and welcome to Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. And all of a sudden, we're only 4 weeks away from the end of the NBL regular season. It's been a wild ride, and it's fair to say all 10 teams technically can still make the top 6. Probably, realistically, 9 of them are still in the mix, and that's probably being generous to one of them. But it's a fascinatingly even season, and it's only going to get more interesting over the last 4 weeks. And I'm fascinated to get my co-host thoughts on, is it Melbourne United still the title favourites, or is it the Perth Wildcats that have now usurped them? We've got no excuses from the Wildcats or the Bullets for a tough travel schedule this past weekend. South East Melbourne Phoenix, unfortunately, continue to spiral, and it's a little bit tough to watch right now. Maybe the same old Hawks are coming back as well under Justin Tatum, with that potential fairy tale coming to a little bit of a slide. The fairy tale of the Adelaide 36ers, though, under Scott Ninnis is continuing. We saw a Bryce Cotton, Jalen Adams MVP battle as well on Sunday. Plenty for us to get through after round 16 in the NBL. My co-host this week, Simon Mitchell, former South East Melbourne Phoenix coach. Simon, we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah, you filled the agenda, so plenty to talk about.
Yeah, thanks for joining me once again. We're here, as always, thanks to Hoop 7 and TABtouch. 4 weeks to go in the season, Simon. I mean, how are you feeling about the way the league's placed?
Yeah, I feel like we're getting over the hump of the season right now. Thought the games were a little bit harder to watch. I mean, there were some really good games, but some of them were not so great. And we're trying to find some consistency in some of these teams. And outside of Perth right now, they're probably failing to find that, really. So,
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, though. I think as we head down the straight, just the race for the 6 and the 4 is going to be exceptional.
Now, before we get stuck into all of the things on our agenda, since our last show, I saw you pop up on our TV screens as well, Simon. How did you find sitting alongside old Gazy?
Well, yeah, got the late call up to do some show on ESPN. I don't watch TV shows on the NBL TV show, so I wasn't familiar with the jump prior to jumping on it. But yeah, no, it was like a pair of old shoes, to be honest, just sitting there yakking about the NBL. So yeah, it was very comfortable. Enjoyed doing the show. Haven't received a call to come back, so the ratings must have been too good, but I enjoyed the experience anyway.
I was surprised because once I saw you turn up on the screens, I thought it might be something that we're going to see for more of the regular season. We've talked about it a little bit when you've been on the show. I mean, would you like to do more of that sort of work, and also would you like to do some of the commentary if you get asked?
Well, yeah, you got to be invited to do that stuff. So, yeah, I had some chats in the off season with some people at the NBL in regards to that. They wanted to have a chat about it. Said, yeah, I'd be interested in it, and that was pretty much where it finished off. So, yeah, never heard back and didn't chase them up. So, yeah, that was Andrew put the call in to me the other week. Obviously, I'm assuming, well, I guess they had Trevor on the show previously,
Yes,
and they wanted to get another ex-coach on. Yeah, so I think it was short notice. He just put the finger on the dial, and yeah, because I'm local, it was easy for me to get there.
No, I actually enjoyed you being on, and I'm disappointed you haven't been back. But that's a good thing for us, and means you can save your best stuff for us here on the show, Simon. What stood out to you from what we saw across the weekend? Like you touched on, some of the games were a little bit tough to watch, especially the two involving the Phoenix. Unfortunately, they're finding it a little bit hard to be competitive right now. And we saw some blowouts, but we did see some tight games as well. We saw a Latmayan buzzer beater for the Taipans against the Hawks. We saw the 36ers under Scott Ninnis continue to get the job done on the road. And it's remarkable to say that we thought they were locked into the wooden spoon for pretty much the whole season, but all of a sudden, if they keep winning, they could still end up in a play-in game. And I really was impressed with the way the Brisbane Bullets bounced back from a hiding in Perth and less than 48 hours later to bounce back in Cairns and get that win. Any of those things stand out to you, Simon, or what stood out to you, what we saw across the weekend?
Clearly, all three of them were big standouts. I guess the Perth Wildcats' dominance over Brisbane, and then to come back and defeat Sydney in a blockbuster. Sydney just sitting back in their lazy boy chairs all week and just waiting there on a Sunday afternoon and getting everyone when they're bruised and battered. But yeah, no, I thought the resilience shown by Perth was excellent. I think one thing we can't overlook also is just the dominance of Tasmania over Melbourne United and that victory as well, and just the concerns, I guess, that we should maybe all have a little bit of, just with what's going on with the absence of Shea Ili. Yep. Melbourne United really need him, and it's never been more apparent than it was in this round.
Let me quickly run through the results, and then we'll start with Melbourne without Shea. So the round started with the Adelaide 36ers getting their first road win under Scott Ninnis, beating the South East Melbourne Phoenix 110-85, and then we saw, like I said, the buzzer beater from Lat Mayen for the Cairns Taipans to beat the Illawarra Hawks 93-92. Then the JackJumpers, big winners over Melbourne United 107-86. Then even bigger winners, the Perth Wildcats over the Brisbane Bullets 118-86. Then on Saturday, the Breakers beat the Phoenix 106-75. And then the 36ers kept on winning 96-89 in Wollongong against the Hawks. And then on Sunday, the Perth Wildcats kept winning, kept scoring, kept doing a lot of things very impressively, beat the Sydney Kings 104-98. And finally, the Brisbane Bullets bounced back to beat the Taipans in Cairns 102-84. Let's talk about Shea Ili at Melbourne United, Simon. I go back to last season after one of the throwdowns, and Shea didn't play that game. And I remember somebody asked you a question post-match about beating Melbourne without Shea and what an impact he had. And I forget who you were missing at the time, but you weren't at full strength either. And you were kind of miffed that there was such a focus put on them playing not at full strength when you weren't at full strength either. But you handled it well, and you did talk about the importance of Shea even when you were coaching against him. Now that you've had a chance to look at it, how significant is the absence of him for Melbourne, and should we be concerned that we don't see him back at all this season given the ongoing problems?
I'm not sure of his current situation, so I won't jump the gun and be too. I won't prescribe him with a seasoning injury or anything like that. So I don't know anything about what's happening with him. Yep. But concerns, yes, I have concerns. I've got concerns, firstly, for his health, that he keeps getting these knocks, and I'd like to see that not happen, because I've said this a few times throughout the years, that he is my favourite player that has never worn a uniform that I coached. Yeah. So I just love the impact he has. I love the way he goes about it, his professionalism. And he's become that player that I guess Ryan Brockhoff was to the South East Melbourne Phoenix, that when he's not out there, it's very, very noticeable, because they make everyone around them better with the little things that they do. Yep. And the one thing that one thing we used to always do when Shea, or what we tried to do when Shea was absent, was really go after the point guard and put pressure on them and try and tire them out. A little bit like what they like to do with the tandem of Dally and Shea, but you could do it the opposite way around when Shea's not there. You know, especially with Chris at the two, he's not the most accomplished of ball handlers against pressure. But it was something that we used to try and affect. I think Melbourne United are not quite the weapon without him. Now, we know that they were missing JLA as well. Yeah. Travers has seen a little bit of time on the sideline in recent times as well. So they've not been travelling at 100%. But if you go off the win-loss record of the last 2 years with Shea or without Shea, and I know I put a tweet up this week, but I can't seem to find it. They travel at about 30% win-loss ratio, a 30% win ratio when Shea doesn't play. And they're up around 75% when Shea does play. So it's a huge determinant. We've got a rather large portion of basketball to ascertain when coming to that conclusion, and it's not like he's only missed a handful of games. He's missed a lot and looked bad without him.
No, I found that tweet. 25-8 with him in the lineup the last 2 seasons, and 5-11 without him. I mean, that almost just says it all on its own, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, that's the impact that he has, and Yeah, he's a special player. There's few players that affect the game defensively at the level that Shea does, that I've seen. Damian Martin was certainly one of those. Dennis Rodman was one of those.
Yes.
But very, very few through the annals of basketball history affect the game. I compare him to Deion Sanders in the NFL. Yep. Deion was a great cornerback, and quarterbacks pretty much just refuse to throw to his side of the field. So all of a sudden you're narrowing, all the congestion's going to be on one half of the field. And you didn't have to ever throw help out at Deion. He just shut everyone down. He was and I feel like Shea Ili's that guy. That you just don't run plays at his guy too often because he just disrupts too much.
I think we saw the perfect example against the JackJumpers. They did a great job, Melbourne did, defensively on Milton Doyle. They denied him the ball a lot. They kept him pretty quiet offensively, but because they didn't have the duo, they didn't have both Dally and Shea, they couldn't stop Jordan Crawford, and we saw Jordan Crawford get back to form, and I can't help but think that probably doesn't happen if Shea's out there.
Without a doubt. No, it's a great matchup for Melbourne, having Shea on Jordan, and Jordan relished the freedom of not being there. So
Melbourne's still on top. They're 16-6. Perth, all of a sudden, they're only one game behind. They're 15-7. They've won 6 in a row, have the Wildcats. All season long, I think everyone has been unanimous thinking Melbourne United is the championship favourites. Do you still think they are? Or would you put the Wildcats either on par with them or ahead of them right now?
I think right now I've got Perth ahead of them.
Yeah.
I think their fans should feel entitled to feel that they're officially favourites. But I only say that in the absence of Shea and JLA. And I think if those two return, and there's obviously a little bit of time left in the season for them to return and Melbourne to regain their mojo, then I think that a full and healthy Melbourne United will be a handful. And but Perth certainly are the form team of the NBL right now and should enjoy their favouritism.
No disrespect to the other 8 teams, but right now, would it be disappointing if it's anyone but those two playing off for the championship series?
I think it would be. I don't think anyone's really put their hand up and said we're a contender on a consistent level. Now, we've seen a few teams put their hand up momentarily, but those have been the two dominant teams, East Coast versus West Coast, superstars across the board. That's the series I would love to see. But those Tassie JackJumpers, if they come across Melbourne United during the playoffs, anything can happen. For whatever reason, styles make fights, and they've got the wood on Melbourne United. They just do.
Well, if Melbourne needs any more motivation to want to finish first, avoiding Tasmania in that semi-final matchup is enough on its own, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I want to get your thoughts on coaching a superstar. So, I mean, you had Mitch Creek probably as your superstar in your time. I mean, you had other really high-quality players as well, but Mitch is the one that stood out. I mean, when you're coaching a superstar, do you coach them differently than another player? I mean, I love when John really talks about how he handles Bryce Cotton right now, and he just says, he's fit enough to stay out there as long as he wants to stay. So if he wants to play 40 minutes, he can play 40 minutes. And I try to get the team to play a way that will get the best out of him, but I try to stay out of his way. I couldn't help but feel like watching the game with the Wildcats and the Kings on Sunday that Bryce was allowed to go out there and play to his strengths and didn't come out of the game when the game got tight, and he put in another great performance. Jalen Adams played pretty well, but I felt like every time it felt like he was either getting into the game or starting to pick up some confidence, he was either the ball was either taken out of his hands and somebody else was bringing the ball up the floor, whether it was Sean Bruce or somebody else, or he was taken off for a rest. I mean, how do you do you coach a superstar differently to everybody else?
I'm not sure if differently is quite the... I think you coach everyone a little bit differently. Yeah. Everyone has different personalities, and you've got to try and find a way that you can motivate and enable your players to the best of your ability. Now, some you can get up in their faces and scream blue murder into them, or others you got to give them a big hug. So I think that you kind of take every player at their own, what works for them. Now, that doesn't transfer to discipline. Okay, so discipline, I think, has got to be one on all, in the sense that if you've got team rules and they're broken, then you stand by what your rules are. That's your culture, and everybody abides by that. But when handling people, I think you have to handle people differently. Now, I think John's taken some good advice from someone. Staying out of the way of Bryce Cotton has worked for everyone who's coached him.
It has.
And I don't know if he may have got it infringed upon him a little early in the season, but he certainly got out the way in recent times, and they've been a marvellous team to watch. And I think the only thing John needs to do is just make sure that Bryce keeps getting his touches, and good things will happen for the Perth Wildcats.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, Simon, before we take a break, let me go through one more topic. Let's stick with the Wildcats, but also the Brisbane Bullets. So we've seen teams handle double-header road trips differently right across the season. These Friday nights to a Sunday afternoon can be tricky. Some teams have handled it better than others, and I mean it's a genuine excuse, I think, to be tired on a Sunday afternoon if you've played at the other side of the country. But I was impressed by the attitude of both the Wildcats and the Bullets after the game on Friday night. Neither of them wanted to complain about the fact that they were going to be playing in Sydney and Cairns respectively on Sunday, and both of them went and got the win on Sunday afternoon. I mean, what's the best way to handle the situation with a short road trip, first of all, but also how important is it to have the mindset of not wanting to make an excuse before you get out there? And we've seen teams, especially Adelaide earlier in the season, have an excuse built in before they even play that Sunday game or the second part of the doubleheader. How important is it to have the mindset where you don't want to complain?
Yeah, I mean, everyone goes through it, and that's what was, I guess, the disappointing part with Adelaide complaining. I think there was an element of fool's gold that some people were celebrating last week when Sydney flogged New Zealand. I saw one of the worst 2-3 zones imaginable keep a team to 76 points.
Yep.
Outside of Jordan Hunter, who was exceptional in the zone, protecting the rim, there was just gaps everywhere, and New Zealand were able to find them. They just didn't put the ball in the hole.
Yeah.
And I thought the celebration of, that was great to see they're back. Offensively, they were brilliant. And Sydney Kings, this is against New Zealand the round before.
Yep.
They were brilliant. The ball moved. There was way more touches in the half court. It was popping around. They shot the ball well because of it.
I think from memory it was 76% they shot at half time, but it's something ridiculous.
Yeah. But the ball was popping around, and New Zealand were just a fraction slow, closing out. They copped their whipping and went home, and everybody celebrates the Sydney Kings. But you've got to put it in perspective. They've sat back in their company chairs on the Sunday and waited for New Zealand, who had to do the extra travel, get there, and they've just put them to the sword, which is fine. That's what happened. And New Zealand take it on the chin continuously, always have, and they go about their business. And I think that's the way to go about it. Now, we saw Perth, turn around after playing Brisbane at home. Now, admittedly, they could probably turn the Jets down a little bit early in that game because that was a contest that was over fairly early.
Yeah.
And keep a little bit of fuel in the engine for that Sydney game, and it certainly came in handy. But it's a long trip from Perth to Sydney, and even longer for Brisbane to get up to Cairns.
It is.
And they were brilliant. Both teams were excellent in taking care of their business against the odds.
What did you find was the toughest road double to do? What did even as a coach, what took it out of you the most for that second half of a doubleheader game? What did you find the toughest part about it?
Well, there's been a few. I think the New Zealand trip's always tough, especially if you don't get them in Auckland.
Yeah.
Because you usually got a connecting flight. You're usually at the airport at 4 a.m. There's the time difference, and you're on a 7 o'clock flight, or you're up at 4. You're at the airport at 5. You got the 7 o'clock flight because it's international. You have to be there, and then you've got to fly to some other part of the country. That can always be difficult.
Yeah.
I know that we had a road trip where we played Perth in Perth, and then had to fly back to Melbourne. And then jump on a bus at like 10 o'clock at night and drive to Bendigo for like a 12 o'clock tip-off the next day against, guess who, Melbourne United.
Yep.
And I remember that one being tough, but I remember us really, I think that galvanised our group because whilst we didn't beat Melbourne in Bendigo, even when we landed, like everything was shut. It was 10 o'clock and everything was shut, and we couldn't get a bite to eat. So it was a tough trip from that perspective. And then the quick turnaround to get to Bendigo, but we really finished the game off well. We came from a bit of a margin down and made a game of it. I think Yanni Wetzel may have had a costly turnover down the stretch, which resulted in maybe losing by 8 in the end. But we were right in it. We could have gone either way with like 90 seconds to go. I just remember our group, talking to the group afterwards and just, thanking them for the character that they showed, and thanking them for representing the team in the way that you should. Every time you take the floor to the best of your ability, but it's pretty easy to make excuses. It's pretty easy for players to get in their own heads. And as we talked about, we saw that in Adelaide. And, it's very, very disappointing when it happens. And it happens to everybody at some stage. Yeah. But it's very, very disappointing when players let themselves off.
Yes. No, absolutely. All right, Simon, that's been a good first segment. Let's take a break. We've got a lot more to talk about when we come back after hearing from TABtouch.
He'll make it for sure. That's why I backed him on TABtouch.
You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. I'm here with Simon Mitchell once again this week. We talked a bit about the Perth Wildcats earlier, Simon. I want to get your thoughts in a bit more detail about what you're seeing from them, because the turnaround has been amazing since they lost that game at home to the Brisbane Bullets, which seems like a lifetime ago now, but we all felt like that was potentially the tip of the iceberg in a bad way, where everything was going to, fall off a cliff after that. But the turnaround's been incredible. They've won 13 of 15 games since then. They've scored 100 points or more in the last 6 games in a row. They've won all 6 of those games. It's not just Bryce either. I mean, Ty Webster running the point has been a masterstroke, the way that John Riley's got him playing. You've got Hiram Harris doing terrific things, Christian Doolittle doing a lot of great things. Jesse Wagstaff is playing such an important role that it makes you wonder why he wasn't playing in the first half of the season, I guess. But and then Keanu Pinder's really stepping up as well. What do you see that the Wildcats are doing so well?
The greatest improvement from last year for me is their defensive element that's brought to the team. Yeah. Now, Doolittle obviously brings a little bit of that, as does Hiram Harris with his physicality, and they've got a little bit of rim protection now, which hasn't been traditionally where Perth have been strong. Yeah, I think their efforts at the defensive end have been a huge improvement. I still think there's room for them to improve on the defensive boards. Still think that's an area where they can fail at times. But the other thing is that I think they keep the ball alive a lot more now. Last year they were a really poor rebounding team at both ends. I think this year, from the offensive standpoint, their offensive rebounding's been really good in comparison to the previous year. So they're around the middle of the table in regards to numbers, but they're up over 30%, which is up where the great Perth teams used to be. Yep. And I think those extra opportunities, and Bryce is so dangerous from the offensive rebounds. Like if you go back to their game against South East Melbourne last year in the playoffs, we had that game under control at three-quarter time. And they were one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the league, and we're one of the best defensive rebounding teams. And then out of the blue, they just started getting every offensive board and kick it out, and there's Bryce, bang, 3. Oh, there's Bryce again, bang, 3. And it was all off offensive boards. We did an all right job of shutting him down in the half court, but it was the second opportunity shots. And, that, to me, was the first time we saw Perth all year long really look good in that element. And we've seen that improvement this year, and I think those second shot opportunities, along with their defense, has been exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, because their offense was really good last year. They were tough to stop. They were scoring probably similar numbers, but all of a sudden, if they can maintain that offensive level, but also be better defensively and better rebounding, that's where the improvements come. And I guess that's why you feel that they're the title favourites right now.
Yeah, no, I feel like right now, with the roster that Melbourne United put out on the weekend, I feel like Perth would win a series. Yeah, so the one thing that they've carried on since Trevor's days is that they still look after the ball really well. Yep. I think from the eye test, I feel like they're more active with their hands at the defensive end as well. Yeah. I know that Travers used to jump the lanes pretty well and get turnovers, or create the break from that perspective. But I feel like there's more people contributing in that area again this year. And I think there's been improvement across the board, and they've maintained their offensive flow. So, good times for the Red Army.
Yes. The team they beat on Friday night, they beat the Bullets by 32 points, and I had concerns for the Bullets because they had to fly back to Brisbane, fly up to Cairns, and play on Sunday afternoon, and it had the potential to be a horrible weekend. But I loved Justin Schiller's approach after the game on Friday night. He just said all that matters now is how we respond. I mean, we put this behind us and we need to respond, and he had confidence that his team would respond, and they were terrific on Sunday. They outplayed the Taipans from the start. They made it a focus to go inside, and Baines and Harrison were terrific. How tough is it to put a 32-point loss behind you and then stay on the road, go into a hostile environment in Cairns and get a dominant win like they did?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier to come back after a difficult road trip like that when you've lost by 30 than it is if you've lost in overtime.
Yeah, sure,
I mean, you're going to have a little more fuel in the tank to come back in that second game.
Yep.
The other thing also is, as a player or a competitor, is that you just can't wait to get back out there and rectify the situation. Obviously, the pride's on the line after getting your tail handed to you in the manner that they did by Perth. And look, it was a great effort by them. It is an extraordinarily tough trip from Perth to Cairns, regardless of the result on the Friday. And look, Justin did a great job of rotating his players as well in that second game. There was it just felt like everybody was fresh, and there was quick rotations, and I thought they did an excellent job. It was great to see. Really happy for Justin. Really happy for the Brisbane faithful, who saw some pretty rugged times last year, and exceptionally happy for my man D-Mac.
Yes.
To see the winning. But let's hope. I really hope it'd be a great story if Brisbane can keep this rolling. We'll wait and see. There seem to be 3 games on, 3 games off all year long. And, just hope that with a handful of games to go, they can string a few more together.
Let me know your thoughts on Aaron Baines. I mean, going back to Cairns is as close to a homecoming for him as there is in the league. He grew up in far north Queensland and still proudly calls himself as coming from that sort of area. He clearly hasn't endeared himself to the Orange Army up there, though. I mean, but it also seemed like the louder the boos got for him, the more that spurred him on. What it reminded me of was Mark Worthington every time he would come back to Perth, and he loved playing that villain role and wanted to hear the boos, and probably didn't feel like he was doing his job unless he was hearing the boos. What did you make of Bainesy's performance up in Cairns?
He probably had one of his best games of the season.
He did.
He was. I think he's been pretty average at best, given his reputation and I guess expectation that some would have of him. I don't think he's exceeded anybody's expectations.
No.
I think he's found the NBL a little bit difficult with regards to the refereeing. And I think he gets a bit of latitude, like more so than some. I think he's allowed to wiggle and move and use his elbows can sit outside his body cylinder a little more, and he doesn't get a rough trot. I don't think, compared to some of the other bigs floating around the league. He does bring some of it on himself, but if he can keep himself on the floor, if he can stay focused mentally, I feel like there's a role for him to play now. Quite often in the finals, in the playoffs, the game becomes a little bit more half-court, and you need the bigger guys to hold up an end. And, I think he's someone with his experience that he can play a really key role. But I said pretty early in the season, he handed over the starting spot to Harrison through his behaviour, and I think Harrison's taken that starting spot and run with it, and it will never go back. And, I think Bainesy, for the remainder of his career, is probably going to be that backup player. And if he wants to play the villain's role, with less responsibility, I think he could find a real niche. And there is a niche for that guy that comes in with a physical presence, but you've got to accept the physical hits when they come back as well. And I think that's probably the area where I get a little disappointed in, that he's prepared to lose his feet, throw himself to the floor, and hold his jaw a little too long when it's just a little clip.
But he doesn't like it if someone does that, if he runs into them, though, does he?
No, and that's where my criticism probably stems from, and that I'm all for blokes who like to play physically and shell it out, but you've got to be able to accept it. It just can't be one.
You touched on Tyrell Harrison. He's one guy that has exceeded expectations, and he's given Justin Chiller no choice but to keep him in that starting lineup through his performances. I mean, he demands that he starts and finishes games because he's playing so well. I mean, 32 points and 22 rebounds across the 2 games this weekend from him. I think he was their only shining light in the loss in Perth, and then he backed it up in Cairns on the Sunday. You've talked before about how highly you rate him and how you hope that he continues to finish out his career in Brisbane, but is he even surprising you a little bit just how well he's playing right now?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if he's surprising me. I think what I've enjoyed is that he's there every game.
Yep.
You know, and we've not seen that for him for the last few seasons. He seemed to have been a little bit injury prone, but it's great to see a big fella get a run and get on a bit of a tear. And he was excellent. You know, he very, very nearly got himself an award this weekend, but he's had an exceptional season. He solidified that starting role. That's his moving forward. And I think next year, you know, with the further emergence of Rocco Zukowski, I think they're going to be, you know, one of the teams that are going to have that two-headed monster, which we've seen do very, very well this year in regard. Well, Melbourne United and Shana can do very, very well.
Last thing on the Bullets. Last time we spoke, we talked about what you thought we might get from Casey Prather with the Bullets. Up until Sunday in Cairns, I don't think we'd seen a lot to get too excited about. So he played 2 games on minimal minutes and then he missed 2 games after being unwell. But I think in the patches we saw up in Cairns suggests that he might still have a pretty important say, even if he's only playing 10 to 15 minutes a game over these last 4 games for the Bullets and maybe some playoff games, that he could still make a bit of a difference.
Yeah, I think with the evenness of the league and the ability pretty much for anybody to make the finals right now, if you can just string a few together, you don't want to be matched. You don't want to be facing Casey Prather in a playoff series. He just thrives in that situation. He's mentally very tough, and he knows that that's when he thrives. He enjoys those moments the most. Look, the guy hasn't played in 2 years. And like for him to have a little bit of ring rust, I think is excusable.
Yes, absolutely.
But look, he showed a little bit of quality there on Sunday. And look, I hope his knees hold up, and I hope that they can just slowly bring him along, and he can maybe get up over 20 minutes a game, maybe into the mid-20s by the end of the season. And if they can, geez, they've got a lot of depth. They've got some depth across the board.
They absolutely do. I think they're probably, along with Melbourne and Perth, they're probably the next deepest team. And I think Justin's built that team deliberately to be that way. And they're another one of those teams that haven't played at full strength. I mean, even, you know, they seem to be missing at least one player at every game. And yeah, they've done well to get to 12-12, and it's probably tough to see them not making the top 6. Whether or not they finish in the top 4 are probably, you know, it's probably up to them and Sydney right now, you'd probably almost think.
Yeah, look, who knows? A weekend can just turn the tables so dramatically. You know, Brisbane drop a couple and they're next, then they're back around the bottom. If they win a couple in a row, they're solidifying a top 4 spot. So that's how crazy it is.
Yeah. South East Melbourne Phoenix, it's tough to watch them right now. I really feel for Mike Kelly right now, and we'll get to that in a second. But given your history at the club over the last 4 years, I mean, the numbers are ugly. They've lost their last 5 games, 8 of the last 9. They've lost those by an average of 25 points. They're only scoring 78 points a game. They haven't scored more than 85 points in the last 9 games. From your perspective, and you've got a very unique perspective, how tough is it to watch them right now?
I very nearly shut the game down this weekend.
Yeah.
I watched the Adelaide game, and I was really happy for Adelaide. Like I was, you know, they've seen some dark times, and I'm not that emotionally connected to teams in the NBL or even my own teams, being, you know, ex-Phoenix and ex-Melbourne United.
Yeah.
I'm emotionally connected to people on each team, and so I like to see them do well. I've loved seeing Scott Ninnis do well, and you know, as an old 36er, the romance of bringing the favourite son back, and you know, he had a rough time of it last time he was head coach, and to see a little bit of success, and you know, like there's some romance in that, and I've enjoyed that. So, and also enjoyed watching Galloway and Trey Cowell. So I enjoyed from a different perspective what was going on in that game. But I was devastated for what South East Melbourne put out on the floor. And the game was so far and away over at half time that I struggled to go back to it in the second half. But then I was like, well, just focus on the Adelaide blokes and the guys that you want to see do well, and talk myself back into it. But it got harder as the weekend went on, especially in the Breakers game, where unless Dane Panay was going to get some minutes out there, I didn't have a lot of investment. And it was just a tough watch. They're playing really poorly. I don't think anyone's got expectations on them to win games right at the moment, just given the personnel that they've lost and the lack of. I know that they're probably only a couple of soldiers down right now, although a couple of murmurings say that there may be more, but or more injuries that have been carried. But look, you want to see some fight, and I'm not sure we're seeing the fight and the pride that is the price of entry for a player, and that's unsustainable. That's got to change between now and the end of the season. That has to change because it's hard to survive those sorts of efforts and those sorts of results.
You don't want to rely solely on your imports, but it's only natural that you need your imports to be out there and to be playing at a high level and to be setting the standards if you're going to be successful. So right now, we know Alan Williams is done for the season. Gary Brown, whether or not he's still not 100% healthy or his mind's not in it, I'm not sure, but it's fair to say he didn't have a good weekend, and Abdul Nader just hasn't adjusted to the league and hasn't found a way to really make an impact. I mean, it makes it tough when you're starting with three imports that aren't giving you what you need, either from a physical or a form perspective.
Yeah. I mean, obviously with Big Sauce out for the year, that leaves them a little bit limited up front.
Yeah.
Gary Brown, I believe, doesn't look healthy. To see him get his pocket picked twice, and I know Park Jackson Carter is a really quick player, but so is Gary Brown, and those handles are pretty crazy that he's got. And to see that happen is a pretty good indicator of where his health is at, I believe, that he just doesn't have that explosiveness. He just couldn't take off, from what I'm seeing. And, look, it's sad to see him going through what he's going through right now because he's capable of so much more and clearly being inhibited by his health. I thought it was always going to be a tough ask for Abdul Nader. I'd probably disagree a little bit and say that we haven't seen much from him. I think there's been glimpses, but as we've seen with so many players come into our league, making the adjustment to the whistle in Australia is a little bit unique. Yeah. Now, I thought some of his fouls on the weekend were just straight up reckless. And, again, it can look that way when you've got someone who hasn't played in 2 years. Yeah. I mean, his fitness levels are not at the level they probably need to be. And, I think it was a smart move by Tommy to have a swing with the change. I mean, obviously it was brought on by things that happened off the floor, but even on the floor, I thought, geez, the loss of Mola, they've got to have a 3 minute. They've got to replace it. Like Ruben Tarangi's minutes have not been strong enough to say, well, we'll just go to Rubes. You got to try and find that play. And I mean, you just talked about Casey Prather, who's in exactly the same situation as Nader, only that he's probably got a little more experience in the NBL and knows how it's adjudicated. And we're seeing him be brought along. But I think that adjustment period for Nader needs to happen swiftly, and he needs to stay on the floor. He's clearly talented, but the Phoenix need him on the floor and playing at a good level.
The thing I'm most scared about from the Phoenix is that I just don't want Mike Kelly to cop the blame for the way things have fallen away late in the season, because I don't think there's any more he could have done. I mean, the injuries they've dealt with and a lot of the issues are completely out of his hands, and we know how badly it ended for him in Cairns. And I've spoken to him about this before, and his family's been through a lot, having to move all around the world and around the country so often for his basketball career. And I just hope he gets to stay in one place for a while and get a good run at it. Would it be pretty rough if he's the one that has the finger pointed at him for the way this season's turned out?
Oh, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to win with the team that's been put on the floor most weeks. Yeah. I just don't think that's that's going to happen. I don't care who you put out there. You know, Bill Belichick could be riding the sidelines for the Phoenix. No, it doesn't matter. But at the same time, we all live and die by our records, and that's the nature of the beast. And Mike's well aware of that. And look, Mike's a mate of mine, and nothing would make me happier than to see him turn this around and snag a few wins between now and the end of the season, and maybe even fall into the playoffs. I don't think it's going to happen, not with the personnel that he's fielding, but I just want to see them competitive and fighting to get the best out of themselves. And ultimately, for right or wrong, that winds up on the coach. Yeah. So I hope the team turn it around. But, yeah, I think there's also an element of realism to the whole situation that, this is a little bit out of his control.
Illawarra Hawks, they had an instant lift under Justin Tatum, and now they've hit a little bit of a slide. They've lost their last 3 games. They've still got 7 to play, so they've still got a little bit of wiggle room, so they can still certainly turn it around. But we talked before, when they made the change from Jacob Jackomas to Justin Tatum, and you talked about your concerns with the backcourt of Tyler Harvey and Justin Robinson. Now with Gary Clark battling a knee injury as well, what do you think about the Hawks? Will they turn it around over the last month and sneak in?
Look, I didn't have them. I've not had them in my top 6 at any stage. Even when they had their little form run there, I still wanted to see a little bit more. So I'm not going to be Johnny come lately and get on them now. As much as I'd like to see them be successful, it's a tough league. They can be. That's what I'll say is I think they can be. I think the addition of Kyle Adams a good pickup for them. I don't think Justin Robinson can lead them on his own to the playoffs. I think they need a switch up in that point guard position, and I don't think Dave O'Hickey's the answer.
Well, can I get your thoughts on Justin Robinson's weekend, first of all, then? In those 2 losses to Cairns and Adelaide, he's your starting import point guard, and across 2 games he goes for 2 points, 0 of 13 shooting, and 3 turnovers. Not quite good enough, is it?
No. I mean, he wasn't encumbered by fouls or anything like that, but that's about the production the South East were probably getting as well. And you can't win with that level, or you need production out of your imports. We've seen it before from him during the course of the year, and we've got to be mindful also that he's a player coming off a season-ending injury. Yeah. So my expectations for him for the whole of the year have never been very high. I think that it's a great opportunity for him to use it as a year to get back into the swing of playing basketball after missing last season. But I didn't think it was a great signing by Illawarra, coming off 5 wins and then investing in a guy who just missed a year for you and was not going to be at 100% the following season. So, and we haven't seen the best of him. But at the same time, he's got to be better than what he showed on the weekend.
Do you expect Kyle Adams to actually get some court time now that he's been there for more than a week? Would you expect him to play a bit of a role over the next month?
Yeah, I do. I think he can help them. One of the things Adelaide have done exceptionally well against Illawarra, and other teams do also, is that when you get in the pick and rolls, is that Robinson's inefficiency from the perimeter, and he's pretty poor shooter off the dribble at all 3 levels. He's not a great shooting in the 3 ball. He's poor in the mid-range, and he's not a great finisher at the rim. So you can get under screens and clog the floor a little bit. And Adelaide have done a really good job of that in their games against them. He got off on them in the second game, but in the first time they played him in Adelaide, he went for 0, and he's had another donut this weekend. And with Kyle Adams out there, it's a different look. Dave O'Hickey at the point, you can get under the screens for Wally Bales. You'll get under the screens when he's out there as well. So it clogs the floor up a little bit with those guys at the point. I think with Kyle Adams, you get under a screen, he's going to put it in your eye. So it will open up the floor a little bit. I think a guy like Gary Clark, if he's healthy, will really shine with that extra room. You can't key in on Tyler Harvey quite as much when you've got a shooter on the perimeter. We saw in the Adelaide game, that they could really be aggressive against Tyler Harvey and pick and rolls, and they were hard showing him, and it was pick and pop with Clark, and then they'd full rotate and they'd leave Robinson butt naked in the corner and just late close out in their rotations, and he just misses shots. If that's Kyle Adnam, he's knocking that down. So I feel like he could be a bit of a key. But, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see how he fits in with the team. He just arrived last week. I was surprised they didn't pick him up a little earlier. You know, he's been in the country since before Christmas. Greed has been out for a little while. I would have thought it made sense for Illawarra to jump on that pretty quick, and I think they've left it a little bit late.
Yeah. Another team that might have left it a bit late, but they've become a great story is the Adelaide 36ers. What Scott Ninnis has done is he's lit a fire under his group, but I think he's done it very smartly by making Isaac Humphries such a massive part of everything they're doing, and then trusting his backcourt basically to Trey Kell and DJ Vasiljevic, and then he's got guys playing great roles. Kyrin Galloway's weekend was fantastic. But I think by making those three guys a centerpiece of everything they're doing, it's gone a long way why they've won 4 of the last 5. And gee, I mean, if they win 4 of their last 5, they might even make a play-in game. It's quite a remarkable turnaround.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And, yeah, thrilled for Scott. It's amazing. I honestly didn't see this team turning it around the way they have. I went down and did a few numbers last night because I was intrigued.
Yes.
From what I'm seeing, and I'm trying to make sense of it. So I wanted to go to the numbers and just have a look. And so they started the season out, and I thought the one thing Adelaide had made early on this year that you're trying to find positives. They're 1-4 to start the year. But the one thing I thought they were better at, I thought defensively they were a lot better than they were the year before. And I think former assistant coach Craig Simpson probably needs to take some credit for that because I know that was what his role was to bring that. Then DJ joins the team. They're 1-4. They couldn't put the ball in the hole. They're operating at 99 points per 100 possessions of the offensive end. Which is extraordinarily low. But DJ joins the team now. What you get with DJ is that he's going to fill it up. But also, you're probably going to have to take your hits at the other end. And we saw that on the weekend. Hung Jung Lee getting a hold of him at times, which, DJ needs to be better there. And I think if his fitness gets better, I think he can make greater impact at the defensive end. But it's not his strong point. But he does put the ball in the hole. And at least the threat of putting the ball in the hole opens it up for others. And, from that 1-4 start, we saw their offense really kick in, but unfortunately their defense dropped off. But what we're seeing right now with Scotty is their offense is continuing to improve, but they're going back. They're improving a little bit defensively from where they were. It's been amazing. But Trey Kell and Isaac Humphries have just been amazing under the tutelage of Scott Ninnis. Like their roles have increased. Trey's become the primary ball handler. Isaac Humphries is playing more minutes. He's staying on the floor more, which is important because he's getting into foul trouble early in the season, a couple of games. But he's just being used better. What they do, and when they're exceptional at the offensive end, is their early secondary transition offense. So just drag screens, double drags, punch screens. Trey Kell and DJ Vasiljevic are just going to work. Like they're putting their head down and they're trying to create something. And we see the first quarter against Illawarra, and pretty much every possession while those two are on the floor is one of those two making the play. And they're either getting themselves a shot or they're creating for someone else. But it's all through their aggression. Now, I love that Scott Ninnis has put that in. He's put the responsibility on those two to carry this team. Now, everybody else is going to get opportunities with the crumbs because they're not selfish players and they will lay off to other guys. And Isaac Humphries has been the main guy, but we also saw the pick and pop play of Galloway in the last round, and he seems to have a bit of and you see this with teams like him and Nick Marshall. They connected a couple of times, and I'm sure they've been on the bench 5 at training all year long. And you could just see them find each other. Nick Marshall coming off the pick and twice hook passes back to Galloway, and he didn't have to look for him. He just knew where he was going to be. And you can see little things like that are contributing to the chemistry being built. But, Trey Kell was 14 points a game under CJ, shooting the ball at over 40%, and less than 25 from behind the arc. Under Ninnis, he's at 21 a game, shooting the ball at 45% and at 41% from behind the arc. And Isaac's numbers have gone up even more. So he was at 12 points a game. He's up to 21 a game under Scotty. So, those two have thrived with the roles and the responsibility, and it's been very enjoyable to watch but I just love the way that Scott's done it. Now, when those two don't get early offense, you see Mitch McCarron come into the game, and he's not a guy who wants to create offensively early. He'd rather walk it up at three-quarter pace and kick the ball on and get him into a half court. They're not very good in the half court. They're not a good half court team. When they shoot early or they make an aggressive move early, they're more likely to score. So you can see how Trey Carroll with the ball in hand at the point playing the majority of the minutes, they're a much better team.
Absolutely. And you touched on Kyrin Galloway. Without Jacob Wiley this week, and he was one of the guys that when Scott first took over, his minutes went down a little bit, but the potential he showed on this weekend, the two games, firstly against the Phoenix, 23 points, 7 rebounds, made 5 of 7 from 3 and played almost 31 minutes, and then backed up 35 minutes against the Hawks, 13 points, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks. Made him a pretty obvious choice for the Galen, didn't it?
Oh, we jumped the gun there, have we? Yeah, look, as I said, Tyrell was under consideration, but yeah, look, I love a bloke who just stays ready, and he stayed ready. He's been a bit of a mystery to me because, from afar, and we don't watch the players as closely or in depth as well, obviously coaches do, and he didn't get to play much down in New Zealand, and he didn't get to play much in Adelaide for a year and a half under CJ, and then Scott had him and didn't really throw him into the lineup until Jake got injured. But he's a kid you watch, you're like, geez, he knocks it down. He can protect the rim. He's athletic as hell. He's long. What's wrong with it? Why is he not getting to go? And I go back to the South East Melbourne game, not this round, but earlier in the season when they came back from 18 down. And I reckon he played the best 5 minutes anyone's played this season. He's just come in and absolutely caned Mitch Creek a couple of times, and then we've seen it again this round. He obviously has a thing for South East where he feels very comfortable launching it, and he finds the room against South East, and they need to obviously play him a little harder and a little closer. But yeah, he's one of those kids where you're just like, geez, why doesn't he play? So I watched him a little closer in the Illawarra game because I'm trying to find reasons for his being seated. And look, I think he can toughen up a little bit. There was a couple of instances when Lockie Aldrich entered the game, who, as we know, is a very physical player, and he seeks contact. And he inflicted a couple of hits there on Galloway, and he made good position and scrapped for a couple of offensive boards. And I was like, okay, that's the area that Galloway, that Kyrin really needs to key in, because he looked fallible against that physicality. But if you get him in open space, that pick and pop, he's got a quick release. He's water. He's a good player. He's got tremendous potential, and he's got that rim protection, which everybody wants.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic to see a guy that just stayed a professional. It's not easy when you see your minutes diminish, but he stayed ready and now he's getting rewarded. So, all right, Simon, that's been a lot for us to cover.
Got himself a Galen trophy.
He did. He absolutely did. Best team man for round 16. So well done to him. And then we've got a lot to look forward to in round 17 as well after this from TABtouch. Simon?
He'll make it for sure. That's why I backed him on TABtouch.
You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle and round 17 of the NBL. Simon, we're here thanks to TABtouch, so we'll try to help you find some winners. So download the TABtouch app if you haven't already, or head to tabtouch.com.au. It starts with a doubleheader on Thursday night this week, Simon. We're back in Melbourne, South East Melbourne Phoenix and the Sydney Kings. Do you see any hope for the Phoenix?
I have a little bit of hope for them. I'm hoping that Sydney come out in their 2-3 zone and play it for 40 minutes and give South East a shooter's chance. I'm just not sure they've got the shooters, though. So, no, I think the Kings in that one.
Second up, this is the big game. Perth Wildcats. Can they keep their winning form going? So they've won 6 in a row. They're knocking on the door of top spot. They're pretty much secure, at least in second. But the Illawarra Hawks, if they want to sneak into that top 6, this is one that they need to win. Traditionally, the Hawks have not been good in Perth, but this might be a chance to start turning that around.
Each round you try and think of which is going to be the one upset that you'd like to pull out of the hat, and this is not it. Perth at home. Perth have had the wood on Illawarra for 30 years. I don't see them turning around this week.
Yeah, for the last 20 years, I've watched a lot of those demolition jobs up close and personal. It's been ugly for a long time. Friday night, this will not be ugly. Well, it actually might be ugly, but it'll be a terrific contest. First up on Friday night, New Zealand Breakers. They rediscovered some of their form last week and got some momentum back, and they're now knocking on the door of the top 6. The Tasmania JackJumpers, they found some form as well, and they consolidated themselves in third spot. These two teams have some really tough battles. They generally are tight, tough, ugly contests, it's probably fair to say, but what are you expecting?
I have no idea. I don't know. These two teams are probably two of the biggest Jekyll and Hyde teams, and you're going to get a close game if Tasmania is going to lose.
Yes.
That's what you know. But when they win big. But I think New Zealand at home, fresh legs. I think it'll be a close game. I'm going to back the home team in just. And I was really impressed with Tassie and their demolition of Melbourne. I thought they were excellent. But we just haven't seen it back to back from Tassie this year. So I think this game means a lot to New Zealand. This is a really important one for them if they want to make the top 6. And I think they can, but it's got to start on Friday night at home.
Yep. Second up on Friday night, this one's fascinating too. So the one team that the Brisbane Bullets have really struggled against so far has been Melbourne United, and they copped them again after another loss. So last time when they got spanked in Melbourne, they copped Melbourne when they were coming off a loss, and unfortunately for Justin Schiller, Dean Vickerman took out his frustration on his Bullets team. This time the Bullets are back at home. They're playing a Melbourne team coming off that loss to Tasmania, but Brisbane, they got some form in Cairns as well. I'm fascinated by this one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I'll go with Melbourne because of the form edge they've had against Brisbane, but unless Shea Ili and JLA are back in the lineup, it's kind of irrelevant what they did to them last time, right? So yes. I think the Bullets can take a lot of to heart from that win they had in Cairns, but Melbourne United, not the Cairns Taipans. They're a lot better. So I'm going Melbourne in this one, but I think Brisbane will definitely make a better showing of it than what they have in previous outings against Melbourne.
Yeah, no, for sure. 2 more games on Saturday. Adelaide 36ers against the Cairns Taipans. Gee, there's definitely not room for both of these two teams to make the top 6, and one more loss for both of them is probably curtains almost on their season. So this is a big game, but expect another big crowd in Adelaide, and can they get behind their team?
Geez, it'd be great, wouldn't it, to keep the Adelaide hope alive. We saw Cairns come down Adelaide recently, didn't we? Yes. And get the win. So yeah, I'm going to go Adelaide this time. I think the backcourt right now of Trey Cal and DJ Vasiljevic is just really potent. I'm not sure there's going to be any answer from Cairns in regards to Isaac Humphries. Galloway spreads the floor for them. I just think they're really impressive this weekend, Adelaide, and I just can't trust Cairns at the moment. They're a bit Jekyll and Hyde as well, but I'm going with Adelaide in that one.
This next one on Saturday scares me a little bit. Could it get as ugly as I fear when the Phoenix host the Wildcats?
Yeah, I think it can, and the reason why I think that is because there's some very ruthless people on that lineup, and I say that with all the admiration in the world. That you want to be ruthless and you want ruthless players on your team. And Bryce Cotton, he's not going to feel bad for South East Melbourne. No. He's going to say, well, yeah, let me put 60 on him. Yeah. Ty Webster's not going to be feeling bad for South East Melbourne. He's going to be thinking, well, what can I do that's a little cheeky, a little bit loose? I think the term might be. Keanu Pinder got his face broken against South East last year. He'll have a little something. I think they've got plenty of motivation. They want that top spot. I think they're going to put a hammering on South East.
What sort of scoreline could we expect, do you think?
I'm going to back South East in to give a little bit more of a yelp than they did against Adelaide. Okay. The State Basketball Centre is going to be packed. It's a raucous place. It's very loud. There's passionate Phoenix fans. I think they'll be there, and I think they'll inspire the players. Creaky has a good record against Perth recent times. Yeah. He just needs a running mate right now to go with him. Oh, yeah. If he's going to go for 35.
Yeah, I was just about to say he had 30.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I'd love to see Abdul Nader chime in with 20, see Ben Ayres get 20. and make a game of it. But I feel like the Wildcats by 25 plus.
Sunday, 2 more big games, all important for all 4 teams involved. First up, Illawarra Hawks hosting the New Zealand Breakers, and both of them come into this round trying to break into the top 6, and a lot on the line for both of them.
Yeah, huge. It's a huge game. Illawarra coming back from Perth on the Thursday, New Zealand playing on the Friday against Tassie. There's no real advantage there. I'm going to go with New Zealand, though.
Yep.
I think they've got legitimate playoff aspirations and legitimate playoff opportunities. And I don't think they're a team anyone really wants to face because on their day they're exceptionally talented. I'm going to go with the Breakers on this one.
Last game, another lazy Sunday afternoon in Sydney. Big game as well. Sydney Kings and Melbourne United. What are you expecting?
I'm going Melbourne United. I don't trust the Sydney Kings right now. I don't think they're playing good basketball. Officially off the island. I thought they would turn it around at some stage, but I don't see it happening now. I think that I just see too many bad signs. I'm going with Melbourne United. I know they're not in the greatest form right now, and I'm not sure who they're going to be putting out there on the floor. But, I'm with Melbourne on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to look forward to, Simon. Looking forward to seeing how that all plays out. One more thing I want to get your thoughts on from what we saw last weekend. I think I saw just about 2 of the worst calls that I can remember seeing in a long time, and I want to get your thoughts on which one was worse. So there was, down in Tasmania, Kyle Bowen was called for a double dribble, which clearly was not a double dribble. He picked up his dribble and he never did anything else except pass the ball again. So that one didn't have an impact on the result because it was a blowout already. So that wasn't great. Poor Kyle Bowen was on the end of a couple there late in the game that baffled him, certainly. But then one that did have a potential impact on the result was a missed goaltend from Kyrin Galloway on Hung Jung Lee, which clearly the ball had already come off the backboard by the time Galloway got to it, and it was right down the stretch. It could have brought the Hawks, I think, back within 4 points if it was counted. Which one left you shaking your head more, Simon?
Yeah, there's a few. There's some competition here, and I'm not sure it ends at those 2. I think there was a kickball call a little earlier in the game against Tyler Harvey where there was clearly no kick. And it was a turnover, and that stopped 2 points going the Hawks' way as well. So this is one of the toughest questions I've had this year. So I've had to try and rationalise it. I've come to the conclusion that I'm going with Kyle Bowen, and here's my reasoning, okay? It's hard to imagine something into existence.
Yes.
Which is what happened in that call. Yeah. There was no double dribble, but you've imagined it into existence. It's easy to miss something that happened. Yes. You blink, your attention's diverted, you missed what happened. But you can't watch and see something that didn't happen. Right. So I'm going with Kyle Bowen. Wasn't a double dribble. No, terrible call. The ref owes him an apology. Sign a card, send him chocolates.
Completely agree. I mean, a missed goaltend can happen because it's such a split-second thing. But when you watch the replay of what Kyle did, I don't know how. I don't know how they thought it was a double dribble, Simon. But the only positive was it didn't affect the outcome of the game. It's not the greatest way to end the show, but it's been fun to break everything down and get your thoughts once again, Simon. Your insights are fantastic, and thank you for breaking it all down. We look forward to seeing what happens over the coming weeks and find out who makes the top 6 in the end. But I'll sign off there and say thank you to Hoop 7 and TABtouch for making this show possible. Thank you to you, Simon, and I'll leave you with whatever's on your mind to finish off.
Oh, just thanks for having me again on the show. Hopefully there's still some people listening at the end. We've been on it for a little while, but yeah, look, I think it's an amazing round coming up, and we, it can be a bit of a slog sometimes, the length of a season, but we're about to hit the home straight, and there's exciting times for some teams, and there's going to be some teams that are going to feel a little bit unlucky, but I don't think there's going to be any unlucky teams this year. I think we're going to see some sub-500 teams play finals, and maybe even a 500 team or sub-500 team finish top 4. So there won't be anyone who's out of luck. There'll just be teams who miss out.
He'll make it for sure. Now that's why I backed him on TABtouch.
Hey, Luke!
Yes, Gene Simmons?
He's probably the best when it comes to this stuff!
Thanks, Gene.
You've got the touch. You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose TABtouch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.